I'm running because I'm passionate about education, passionate about students.
What we actually need to do is bring more people into the conversation.
Two new voices in local education are trying to make a mark on the Seattle School Board. Attorney and former high school teacher Omar Vasquez and community program manager and neighborhood activist Zachary DeWolf want your vote for the board's open District 5 seat.
We need to have a bolder vision for public education.
Hear from both candidates.
There is nobody on the Seattle School Board that has any teaching experience.
Who will make the grade on November 7th? Two young candidates are put to the test next on City Inside Out. Welcome to City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. They're millennials, they don't have kids in Seattle public schools, and they're looking for your vote for the Seattle School Board. It's a new kind of race for the board's District 5 position, with community program manager Zachary DeWolf facing off against attorney and former teacher Omar Vasquez. DeWolf, a clear leader in the August primary, says his work on homeless and housing issues make him the best candidate, while Vasquez says his teaching and finance background give him the edge. It's now up to voters citywide to decide which of these new faces moves up to the head of the class for District 5.
I have been serving in the community probably since 2009.
Zachary DeWolf works to help homeless youth for All Home King County. He's president of the Capitol Hill Community Council, and he serves as a commissioner on the Seattle Housing Authority Board. But he wants to do something more.
What I kept coming up against was the fact that so much of the work I was doing was on the back end, on the reactive side. So for me, it was about actually addressing these issues a little bit earlier, more upstream.
That, plus what he saw as a call to action after the presidential election, is why he's making a run for Seattle School Board Director, District 5, which covers Central and East Seattle. DeWolf, a recently married gay man who's also a Chippewa Cree tribal member, says he can bring a fresh perspective to Seattle schools.
As a young person, as a queer person, as a Native person, as a person who just got married and is thinking about having kids, I am at a different point in my life where I am also thinking about schools. And what we actually need to do is bring more people into the conversation.
DeWolf won 47% of the vote in the 5-candidate August primary and has raised almost $30,000 for his campaign through mid-October. He's endorsed by U.S. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, King County Executive Dow Constantine, the Seattle Education Association Teachers Union, and the Stranger newspaper.
Right now, we are not listening. We're not putting together events where we're asking the community what they need.
DeWolf says his top priority, if elected, would be to reach out to schools citywide to better understand family and student concerns. DeWolf also wants to improve communications with state and local governments to gain support for a school district with persistent academic performance gaps between white students and students of color.
At this point, we need to come all in, all work together to figure out how are we going to make sure that racial equity concerns are addressed. We're actually talking about the school-to-prison pipeline. So those are some of the big things I want to do for sure.
Omar Vasquez has some big plans too.
I'm running because I'm passionate about education, passionate about students.
Vasquez, a lawyer dealing with business and tax cases, says he's the right person to guide Seattle schools through a complicated new education funding process from the state, part of Olympia's ongoing work with the McCleary mandate.
It's going to help to have somebody who understands financials and who understands the law so we can make sure we put that money to work for our kids.
Vasquez was also a high school math teacher and says his own background as a Mexican-American who grew up going to low-income schools will help in tackling Seattle's racial equity issues.
We have one of the worst academic achievement gaps in the nation, and even though we have tremendously excellent schools in our district, there's not equitable access for all the students. That has to be our number one priority.
Vasquez won about 18% of the vote in the August primary and has raised about $25,000 for his campaign through mid-October. He's endorsed by the Seattle Times, former King County Executive Ron Sims, the current board member for District 5, Stefan Blanford, and 8 former members of the Seattle School Board. Vasquez also served for about 2 years as a board member for Summit Public Schools, part of the charter school system voters approved in our state in 2012. Charters, which are run by a state commission, not Seattle Public Schools, have faced several legal challenges since then. But Vasquez says he stands by his decision to help the Summit program.
Knew that one day if I ever went into public service, this was going to be challenging in the city, but I did it for the kids, and I don't regret it. And now I'm running to take my skill set and work for all the schools in Seattle Public Schools.
Vasquez says if elected, he's ready for all types of challenges, from finding a replacement for Superintendent Larry Nyland next year to dealing with problems from the federal government.
Who in the world knows what's going to come down from Trump and DeVos, and so we need to be ready to defend against, any kind of cuts to federal funding, which the district relies on heavily.
The biggest issue right now? Who gets your support in the citywide vote for Seattle School Board District 5?
Thank you for voting.
2 young, fresh voices are asking to be heard.
We have to make sure our students are prepared to thrive in Seattle.
We really need to engage our community.
And here they are, the candidates for District 5. We have Zachary DeWolf, we have Omar Vasquez. Thank you both very much for joining us. We had a coin flip before the start of the show, and Zachary, you're going to be up first. Tell us why you're running and what qualifications you bring to the job.
Thank you, and thanks for having us today. I am an enrolled member of the Chippewa Cree Tribe. As you said in the opening statement, Commissioner with the Seattle Housing Authority and a program manager at All Home. But beyond that, I'm also a returned Peace Corps volunteer, where I taught Braille, actually self-taught myself, and then taught Braille, and then opened a library, as well as facilitated 3 programs with an organization called the Native Project. Spring Native Youth Leadership Camp, a summer program for Native youth to make sure that they can continue to keep their academics up for the school year, as well as an after-school program for Native youth and families. I'm running because I believe I have the qualifications we need for our next school board director. I've got the deep governance, policy, and leadership experience. I have a deep civic and community engagement experience. I also have relationships at the city, county, and the state level. I've worked with legislators at all levels of our government to increase opportunities and for our communities, as well as I've been fighting alongside my neighbors for our progressive values, and I would be the first out LGBTQ member of the Seattle School Board. But additionally, I don't think enough young people are engaged in our public schools, and frankly, the narrative we hear so much is that if you have kids, then you should be engaged in schools. But more folks like us actually need to be in that conversation too.
Yeah. I'm going to touch more on that issue in just a little bit. Thanks for bringing it up. Omar, same question to you. Why you're running, qualifications you bring to the
Brian,
job.
great to be here.
Thanks.
I'm running for the Seattle School Board because of the 50,000 plus students in our district. I want to make sure that they get the best possible education that they can. And we've got some really excellent schools in our district, but right now we're facing some pretty significant challenges. We've got huge budget deficits going on in our district. We've got persistent racial inequities going on, and we've got some significant capacity management issues. The school district is a multi-billion-dollar organization. It's a serious business. And right now, more than ever, we need experienced leadership, not somebody using this position as a political stepping stone. And I am the candidate with experience. I've got the education experience. I was a high school teacher for 6 years and a department chair. I've got the legal and financial experience. I've worked on huge transactions as a business lawyer at Davis Wright Tremaine, and I've got the policy experience, having served on the Mayor's Education Advisory Council. And I look forward to sharing how I'm going to leverage my experience to put to work on behalf of all of Seattle students.
There was one piece there you wanted to respond to, Zachary.
I just think it's important to mention that in the opening piece, Omar had mentioned that if he ever ran for office, this would come up and he'd have to deal with that. So when we think about political stepping stones, I think that cuts both ways if that's going to be thrown out there.
I think we're going to suss out a few different issues here. Thank you for going back and forth on this. Very important here. I want to get back to this point about not having kids. You don't have kids in the school district, both in your early 30s. Zachary, maybe I'll start down this path with you. How do you make a connection with the people who are most likely paying the closest attention to this race, which are parents who have kids in the district? How do you sway them?
I mean, part of it comes from the fact that what I've been doing for the last 9 or 10 years in my public service has been out in the community, showing up and listening to people. I mean, that's why my friend Eden Mack, who was on your show last week, her and I are hosting community conversations across this city. That is what I bring to this. That is my sweet spot. I love connecting with community, bringing people together, talking about the issues that are important, elevating things that are important, trying to find solutions to those. That's what people have been telling me that they need, someone that shows up and gets things done.
All right. Omar, same question to you. You're not a parent. How can you truly understand this job?
I have been working in education my entire adult professional life. I've committed my professional life and my civic life to education. I'm passionate about education, and that passion comes from the fact that I grew up and went to low-income schools, and I was very lucky to receive key opportunities growing up that allowed me to go to school on the East Coast and pave the path for me to go to law school. And I now feel like it is a duty for me to extend ladders of opportunities to others to make sure they have similar experiences. So regardless of what happens in this election, I will be doing the work of education in Seattle.
Okay, thanks very much. And Omar, let me stick with you and go back to this question about equity that I think has been such a dominant conversation in the school board races this year. Seattle Public Schools has been wrestling with this issue for decades. Students of color not achieving academically at the same level as their white counterparts. So I know you've talked about your ethnic background, the students you've taught, but what are you planning to do, if elected, to really move the needle
There's
here?
so much work to do on this, and there is no one silver bullet, but
Yeah.
we've got to approach this at all ages. So starting with, we got to look at birth to 12. From 0 to 3, we've got to partner with the city to make sure that they're providing the wraparound services for parents to make sure students develop. From 3 to 5, we need to make sure that the city and the district are coordinating on early ed services to make sure we focus on literacy. By the time we get to early education, from elementary school, one of the ideas I have is to focus on literacy specialists. You see, the academic achievement gap is fundamentally a literacy gap. By the time students get to, by the time they're like age 3, students in low-income families have heard something like 30 million fewer words than students in wealthier communities. So that's got to be how we tackle it at the early ed side. When they get to middle school and high school, we need to focus on increasing dramatically the rigor of our programs. We need to reimagine schools and focus on things like research and media literacy and financial literacy. And that's how, if we increase rigor, if we increase the relevance, and if we build relationships between educators and students, that's how we can begin to finally make the changes.
And I know the city has been working so closely with the school district over the past several years with the Families and Education Levy. It's been difficult to move the needle, though. And Zachary, same question to you here. What do you plan to do to really try to make some changes when it comes to this equity conversation?
I think part of it, one of the things I'm really interested in is, students succeed when they see an educator or somebody like them in leadership in their schools that looks like them. So how do we create programs or opportunities for more teachers of color to be in our schools? Outside of that, it's making sure that we're looking at our discipline policies to make sure they're not disproportionately affecting students of color, as well as looking at programs that are already working in the district. We know that our HCC and advanced learning programs, there's a huge racial disparity in that program, and the part of it is access. So looking at those programs with an analytical eye and saying, how do we improve these and actually increase access for our students of color?
Maybe I can stick on this for a second. When you talk about the city working together with the school district, tell me what you mean. And I know maybe I'll come back to you on this too. What do you mean there? How do you have the city and the school district work closer together?
I think the city needs to focus on wraparound services with its Families and Ed levy.
Okay.
And with respect to the pre-K levy, there's a lot of capacity build out that we need to do. And we can coordinate with district resources and facilities to be able to make sure that the city is able to provide more services for students in early ed.
Okay. Any thoughts there, Zachary? You'd want to, I know you've worked a lot with city leaders on different issues. How do you get that coordination working there between the city and the school district?
I think part of it is just owning up to the fact that we are not serving all of our students as well as we can. And coming together, and frankly, I've got the experience that working with the mayor's office, working with the city council, working with the county, working with the state on how do we elevate these issues and actually do something right.
What did you want to bring up?
I'll bring up that when I was on the Mayor's Education Advisory Council, it was a wonderful thing to see members of city council, educators, business leaders, all kinds of community leaders, community-based organization, executive directors, were all around the table and who are very focused on what the city can do to coordinate to bring better services for our students. And one of the most promising things that came out of that council was an express focus on race and recognizing the issues that race and income play with respect to our achievement gap. And that's amazing that the city has those progressive ideals. Step 2 is now actually bringing the plans to fruition so we can begin to close the gaps.
Okay. Did you want to make a point?
Yeah,
Please.
well, I think too, it's not just depending on those institutions which have a lot of experience in, it's also working with other systems. So thinking about the Seattle Housing Authority, one of the things I'm really proud of doing is we created a pilot program called the Home from School program, which is providing housing for students and families experiencing homelessness at Bailey Gatzert.
Okay.
This is addressing the opportunity gap and reducing chronic absenteeism. So working with other systems too.
Okay. There's another piece, please.
And maybe the most important system, right, is actually with parents and students, right? So let's take a play from what other schools are doing in this district outside of Seattle. Home visitations are tremendous. Teachers need to be able to understand what's going on at their students' homes so they can begin to make a difference and bridge that partnership. You know, one of the big problems that families are having in Seattle, particularly low-income families and families of color, is there are barriers to access the school. If you don't speak the language, if you don't feel like the school is a safe place, the school needs to take the initiative to build that bridge.
That's why you often hear that opportunity gap phrase put out here when we talk about achievement gap. There's opportunities that are lost there as well. Zachary, I want to go back to you and talk about the best fit for a superintendent for Seattle Public Schools. So a big decision for the school board next year when Larry Nyland's contract is up. Does Dr. Nyland need to be replaced? What are your thoughts here?
You know, I think he's been a real stabilizing force, and at a time when we've had a lot lot of issues in our school district. What I really want to see, though, is somebody that has a lot more vision for actually addressing the things that we're so excited about really focusing in on, which is racial inequities in our school.
Yeah.
Somebody that can be visionary and actually wants to take the lead on making that a priority.
Okay, you're not seeing that right now with Dr. Nyland?
We talk about this on the campaign
Yeah.
trail all the time. Fifth worst achievement gap in the
Yeah.
nation. We need someone that is their compass.
Okay. Same question to you, Omar. Do you keep Dr. Nyland around, or what are you looking for in a
You
superintendent?
know, Brian. Let me add a nuance to this discussion here. After this election, there will be 6 new board members.
Right.
6 board members who have served less than 1 term, and if Chelsea edges out Betty Patu in the 7th, all 7 directors will be new. Okay. This is at a time when we're going to have a new mayor.
Yep.
This is at a time when the district has a $150 million budget shortfall.
Yeah.
This is at a time when we got to execute a new teacher contract.
Right.
This is at a time when we have huge capacity management issues. And so to also put on the plate a superintendent search, that's a lot for a new board.
Yeah.
And I think that we do need a stabilizing force, at least initially. Look, I work with Dr. Nyland on the Mayor's Advisory Council. He's a really sharp person. Obviously, we can make critiques about the district and its progress, but I think practically, being pragmatic, I think it's important to stick with Dr. Nyland.
That's going to be a very important discussion going forward, and thank you for bringing that up. Omar, I want to make sure I touch on this charter schools issue. I brought it up in the setup piece there. You have served on this board that oversees Summit Public Schools. You're no longer serving on that board. It's a charter school system here in the Northwest. It's just such a controversial issue here. Voters statewide narrowly approved charters in 2012, as you know, but people here in Seattle voted against them, as did the Seattle School Board itself. So how do you want people to understand your connection to the world of charter schools?
What I want people in Seattle to understand is that I recognize that it's a controversial subject, and I recognize that there are concerns that the charter schools can draw away resources from the public schools, and I'm sensitive to those concerns. Here's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
As I said a moment ago, I'm extremely passionate about education. This is the work I've been doing for over a decade, and this is the work I'll be doing over the course of my professional life. And I was approached by leadership at a charter school to come and work as a director.
Yeah.
And I knew that charters were controversial, and I had my own opinions about charter schools. And I was very candid with leadership about how I felt about charters and said, am I a good fit for you? And at the end of the day, when I was able to go and look at the school and see that it's serving predominantly low-income students, it's serving predominantly immigrant students, it's serving predominantly students of color, and the question I had was, am I going to take this opportunity to use my education experience and my legal experience, my financial experience to serve these students? Many of these students who have left Seattle Public Schools because Seattle Public Schools have just not been responsive. Now, what I want your viewers to know is it's a very small number of students who have left Seattle Public Schools to go to charters, maybe 300, 400, 500 students.
Yeah.
To put this into context, we've got 54,000, a little less than 54,000 students in the district.
Yeah.
We've got between 10 and 20,000 students living in the Seattle Public School attendance boundary zone who are going to private schools,
Yeah.
who are going to Mercer Island,
Sure.
who are going to Bellevue,
Vashon,
who are
yeah.
going to Vashon.
Yeah.
That's what we need to focus on, is that wealthy families have left this district, and now low-income families are leaving the district.
Yeah.
As a director on the school board, my focus is not to advocate for charter schools.
Yeah.
It's what can we do to strengthen Seattle's 99 schools so we can bring low-income families and wealthy families back into the fold.
Thanks for breaking that down. Zachary, I want to get your opinion on charters as we move forward.
Yeah, I
here.
mean, I agree with all the concerns he has, and I stand on the side of voters. And frankly, where I serve is aligned with my values. My values are public education. Public education is a great equalizer in our democracy, and I'm going to fight for that. I'm not going to go serve on a charter school board if I have a value for public education, because I'm going to go fight and be a part of public education in those efforts.
I want to make sure I touch on this, though. There are a number of students who go to charter schools here in the Seattle area. What do you say to those families?
We, to Omar's point earlier, look, I never want to limit a parent's choice, and the main concern is your child and their future, and you got to do what you got to do to make sure that they can be successful and reach their potential.
I should probably bounce this question back and forth. Do you think the Seattle School Board should have a role in authorizing charters in the city of Seattle?
I do not know.
Okay, Zachary?
I agree with their vote. I don't believe so.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I put that out there. Thank you very much. I want to talk about school budget, and Zachary, I'll go to you first here. So our state legislature has a new plan for funding our schools, as we know, part of the McCleary mandate, been going on for a few years now. The very simple version here, some people in our state will pay less in property taxes for school, but people here in the Seattle School District and a few other urban districts will be paying more. I'm trying to get to the root of this question here. How will this new funding structure from the state impact the quality of education for students in Seattle?
It's not actually even fully or amply funding education. So
Yeah.
first of all, I'm hopeful that on October 24th, when the Supreme Court
Makes a ruling,
makes
yeah.
a ruling that it is in the affirmative that they didn't do right by our students here in the state. So I'm going to continue fighting for working with the legislators that I know that have been endorsed by to understand the issue even more deeply. But I want to be on the board and be a voice that's fighting for ample funding, because that is the main issue here. Our legislators in Olympia have not been bold enough in their approach. And frankly, what's frustrating to me is that we need to have a bolder vision for public education. We need to have the compass for our public education so aspirational that we want to get excited and get behind it. Right now, we're just dealing with like little things that don't feel like we're actually moving the needle anywhere, but we're able to check it off the box. So.
That funding piece is a huge part of this. And Omar, I'll draw you in here. Just short-term, long-term impacts when it comes to this new funding plan.
It's important to get into the weeds here for a moment.
Okay.
In this current school year, we're projected to have a $150 million budget deficit. This has nothing to do with the McCleary budget. This has to do with some of the fiscal irresponsibility of the board, and I hope we get a chance to talk about those details.
Please, go ahead.
And
Yeah.
let me say that the McCleary budget is going to affect the next 3 years.
Yes.
Okay. And we're going to expect budget deficits there as well. We did not get a good budget out of Olympia, but those budget deficits are going to be on the order of magnitude of $5 to $25 million, not on the magnitude of $150 million.
Right.
So certainly more manageable. But look, we did not amply fund education, and we have to keep advocating for it. But look, that can't be an excuse for fiscal irresponsibility, and that can't be an excuse for inaction.
Right. There's a couple different pieces here. Please.
Well, I just want to say, too, I think the phrasing irresponsibility is a little bit problematic for me. I think part of what he's referring to is making sure that we're supporting our teachers and making sure that they have pay that is both attractive and retains them, and making sure that our teachers are paid well. That, I think, is what he's referring to as irresponsibility, and I don't necessarily agree with that being irresponsible.
Let's make sure we clarify it. Yeah.
Let's do clarify that.
Yeah.
So we have a teacher contract that was voted on 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that teacher contract had a particular rate of increase for pay. And at the time that the board took that vote, the board knew it did not have the money to pay those funds. And that's why we have this $150 million budget deficit on an operations budget of $850 million. I mean, this is huge.
Yep.
But this did not come out of nowhere, and this did not come out of Olympia.
Yeah.
Now, my opponent is on record that he supports that vote that board took.
Okay.
And here's what that vote means.
Okay.
What that vote means is that at the end of every May, layoff notices have to be issued to some large percentage of teachers.
Yeah.
And so if those teachers have families, if they got mortgages, if they got rent to pay,
Right.
what kind of uncertainty does that create for them?
it
So
creates
when the board cuts checks and it knows it doesn't have the money to cash, not only is that a violation of law, of state law,
Yeah.
it also creates uncertainty for the teachers. It's not good for the teachers. So I think teachers should get paid $150,000 a year.
Sure,
But if
right.
we don't have the money to pay it,
Yeah.
the board has to be responsible with its funds.
I want to make sure I have one more come back to you on this one, Zachary.
Frankly, I have a friend that's a teacher, and he just lives right down the street from me, and he's got to do GoFundMe. He was looking for a second job. That's what this comes back to. I think you could certainly, we can have this story about, people being laid off. That's not right.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we need to make sure that our teachers are paid well, and frankly, they're not. And they're the ones that are low-income folks. They're the ones that are in my neighborhood. 80% of us are renters, and they're barely able to make it in this increasingly unaffordable city.
Yeah.
I want to say, as someone who actually was a teacher for 6 years, my base pay went down every single year that I taught.
Yeah.
I am incredibly sensitive
Yeah.
to the situation for teachers and not
Yeah.
getting paid enough.
Okay, fair enough.
But the reality is, you cannot cut checks that you don't have the money to pay.
Okay.
That doesn't do justice to the teachers.
Okay.
And I want to be clear. I mean, my opponent supported that vote.
Okay.
And that's a vote that's a huge distinction that voters need to think about. Is
Okay.
do you have the financial management qualifications to be able to govern responsibly with
Thank
voters'
you for
tax
going
dollars?
back and forth with that. Zachary, did you want to make a final point there? Or?
Just that I want to make sure our teachers are supported and paid well, that they can live in the city where they're serving and teaching.
Okay, thanks very much. Before we close briefly, I wonder if you could talk about an issue we haven't discussed yet that's important to your campaign that you might want to let voters know about. Zachary, can I start with you on this one?
Every day I go to work at All Home. We're an organization that's coordinating homelessness efforts across King County, and there's 3,500 plus students that are experiencing homelessness in our Seattle public schools. This, to me, is a travesty, and I really want to focus on how do we actually prioritize their needs, and how do we actually make sure that they're able to come to school and not have anything to worry about but their homework.
All right, great. Omar, another idea from your campaign, please.
I want to get back to what the fundamental question of education is. And the point of education is to prepare students with the knowledge, skills, and mindsets so that they can exercise self-determination. And for many of those students, that means breaking into the middle class. Okay? We have got, Washington State is the #1 state with respect to STEM job creation, and yet this state is next to last in the nation with respect to our students' preparedness to capture those jobs. So being able to transform our schools to work for the 21st century means a focus on STEM, it means a focus on media literacy, it means a focus on financial literacy and civics and constitutional law. And that's what I'd like to see for our schools.
All right, some thoughts about curriculum there. Thank you very much. It's time for a closing statement. Zachary, if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks again for having us.
Yes.
I am here because I want to ensure that the promise of a high-quality public education reaches every child, period. And we do that by making sure that our special education program is inclusive and robust. We do that by making sure that our LGBTQ students are seen, valued, and welcomed in our school. We do that by addressing tough, pervasive social problems like sexual assaults in our schools. We do that by making sure that students have a place to sleep at night, that they have meals and breakfast and lunch, and that they have warm clothes. I want to make sure that we are doing whatever we can to ensure that the opportunity gaps, we can close that and support every student in our district.
Thanks very much. I can give you about 30 seconds, Omar, if you could.
Brian, this election is going to shape the next generation of students in this district, okay? Right now, this district needs a director with education experience. It needs a director with a commitment to public education. It needs a director with the legal and the financial skills necessary to govern, okay? Currently, there is nobody on the Seattle School Board that has any teaching experience. I would be the only one. And there has never been in the history of the Seattle School Board a Hispanic director. I would be the first Latino director on the Seattle School Board. So I'm looking forward to collaborating with city staff, district staff, with our community-based organizations and with our universities and with our business communities, but most importantly with our parents and with our students so we can make sure all our kids get the best education.
Thank you both very much, and we will be right back.
I believe extracurricular activities for kids help them in education.
More funding for teachers and staff and for supplies for the kids.
Maybe we can start foreign language in earlier age.
I think more math.
We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter and give us your feedback. Before we close today, it's time for our weekly CIO poll. Whom do you plan to support for Seattle School Board District 5? Community Program Manager and neighborhood activist Zachary DeWolf? Attorney and former high school teacher Omar Vasquez? Or are you undecided? We want to know what you think. Cast your vote and send us your comments at our website, seattlechannel.org/cityinsideout. While you're there, you can watch our programs online anytime. Coming up next time, an election preview. Which are the closest and most fascinating races you should watch? Our panel of ace reporters weighs in. That's next time on City Inside Out. I hope you join us.